most dangerous female prisoners. They say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and killers like Michelle Blair definitely cement this. In a Detroit, Michigan home, Blair was threatened with eviction, but when she refused to get a job to pay her dues, a crew court was dispatched to evict her. But what they found in her home was shockingly terrifying. Inside a freezer, they found the bodies of Stephen and Stoney Blair, who apparently had to have been dead for 3 years. With an apology, Michelle was arrested and tried for murder, and her excuse was that she was killing demons who sexually abused her kids. But there was no evidence to support this claim. In court, Blair was remorseless and had a very nonchalant attitude to the point of interrupting the judge several times. It turned out the killings were so horrendous they included suffocation, skinning, making them drink Windex, and pouring boiling water on them. Blair was so bold that she admitted to the judge that she would kill them again, but she wouldn't get the chance since she was sentenced to life in prison.
You're therefore sentenced to the Michigan Department of Corrections for the rest of your life without the possibility of parole.
While Blair was remorseless, Shayna Hubris was a full-on psychopath. Shayna Hubris was on trial for the murder of her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. Apparently, the couple had been in a toxically abusive relationship until Hubris decided to end things horribly with the murder of Poston. She even called the police to admit it. Hubris claimed self-defense against Poston's abuse, though, and interrogations, Hubris seemed very unusual. She was walking around, singing and talking to herself, commending her acting skills. Probably not something a murder suspect wants on video. In her trials, Hubris continued to claim that she murdered Poston in self-defense, and that he was abusive towards her. But witnesses against Hubris came forward, including her own former cellmate. With all evidence and witnesses against her, Hubris was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with a possibility of parole after 34 years. Until things took a Hollywood-style twist, and a jury member turned out to be a felon himself, so the case was looked into one more time. But Hubris didn't get off lightly, still getting a life sentence, but a possibility of parole after 17 years. It's tragic when murder comes out of love, but even more tragic when it comes from your own family, such as with Sandra Lane. In Detroit, Michigan, 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman was staying with his sweet 75-year-old grandmother when she turned out to be all but, as they got into an argument over his drug use, only for Sandra to suddenly pull out a 9mm Glock and shoot her grandson 6 times. Hoffman tried to call 911, but Sandra's fury was too much, firing off the killing blow while he was on the phone.
911, what's your emergency?
Well, I've just been shot.
What? Who?
I've just been shot.
Where are you at? Okay, how did you get shot? Who shot you?
My grandma shot me.
Your grandma and grandpa shot you?
My grandma.
Okay, and it just happened? Are you there? Keep talking to me.
In court, Sandra claimed it was self-defense, and two sides of the families being at odds, some supporting Sandra, and others like her own daughter, calling her pure evil. A daughter's comments can still be hurtful enough, and they reduced Lane to tears in court, as she was adamant that it was self-defense.
I'm done! I can't take it back.
Even though the jury didn't agree. Sandra eventually got 20 to 40 years in prison, which is practically a death sentence, given her age. The cause of murder can make cases far wilder, just like Shelby Isaac, who got the blood of 3 people on her hands over something as trivial as hair extensions. When Isaac bought some from Eddie Tate and Edwina Thomas, she wanted to return her purchase, but she took her complaint to an insane degree by shooting both Tate and the then pregnant Edwina, killing their unborn child too. Isaac almost got off easy with her charges being dropped when they were reinstated by a grand jury. Isaac couldn't face reality in court, collapsing onto the floor under the table. While some believed she was just acting, the judge and jury went on with their business as if nothing had happened whatsoever. Isaac ultimately received 30 years in prison for her crimes, where she'd have to replace the court carpet she was lying on with a cold prison cell floor.
Foreperson of the jury, Ms. Murphy, is that your verdict? Mr. Aldridge, is that your verdict? Ms. Foster, is that your...
It's hard to believe some things can be worse than murder, but Alison Weaver proved it. In Oakland County, Michigan, a woman found herself facing terror against cannibalism when she went home with Alison Weaver. When Weaver, under the effects of drugs and alcohol, tried to seduce her, the woman ended up in the bathtub with bite and strangling marks, with her ear partially bitten off, all while being sexually assaulted by Weaver. In court, the woman was all tears as she was forced to remember the terror.
My life changed forever. I let Alison Thompson Weaver in my home, and in return she tried to kill me.
Weaver gave an apology, but nothing can make up for the psychological damage and trauma she caused. Even the judge described it as the most horrific case in her career.
But I've been up here for 25 years, and I've seen murder cases that were not nearly as round as this case.
Shockingly, Weaver only received 10 to 15 years, a sentence which many people believed was far too light. At least she has to register as a sex offender, hereby ruining her future. The world is safe that these murderers weren't parents, but unfortunately, Seth and Tatiana Welch were. Near Grand Rapids, Michigan, a 10-month-old child lost her life due to malnutrition and THC in her system. The killers were her own parents, Seth and Tatiana Welch. Apparently, inside the couple's home, things were extremely unhealthy, with mold, vermin, and unlivable conditions for an adult, let alone a child. When their daughter Mary was suffering from malnutrition, they refused medical assistance for crazy religious reasons until Mary died.
Is a charge called homicide, felony murder. It is life without parole.
In court, Tatiana seemed completely clueless, and she claimed that she had no idea what killed little Mary. She also claimed that Seth was abusive, and that somehow this prevented her from taking care of her child. Regardless, Seth and Tatiana would both receive life in prison, without a possibility of parole. Murder is bad enough, but arguing about it in court takes real nerve. Such as Kamiya Gomez, whose crimes extended all the way to the courtroom.
You're gonna shut your mouth or I'm gonna have some duct tape put on it.
After brutally murdering her boyfriend, Marcel Hill, in a gruesome way, including stabbing him 11 times and hitting him with a frying pan, lap, and a table, Gomez stood in court, claiming it was somehow all self-defense.
The way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies. There was a little bit of truth, but mostly I was convicted off of lies.
Gomez was extremely provocative, arguing with the judge and constantly commenting. The judge even got so angry that he threatened to duct tape her mouth. This led to even her attorney telling the judge to do what he needs to do. What he needed to do was give her a life sentence without possibility of parole. It didn't end there, though, as she got on the judge's nerves one last time, and he just went off.
I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well.
On the opposite end of Gomez, some defendants are surprisingly pleasant in court, like Christine and Jeremy Moody, who took it upon themselves to deliver vigilante justice on sex offender Marvin Charles Parker when they shot him and his wife Gretchen in their own home. It was easy enough to arrest the Moodys, given the fact that they were neo-Nazis and part of a white supremacist group called Crew 41. Strangely, though, the Moodys were very cooperative in court, with Jeremy even offering the police to give them the location of another sex offender.
And I believe that God has forgiven me of it. I want the court to know that I've lost everything that matters to me, my children, my wife, and my family. On the right medication, this would have never happened.
The Bible clearly states thou shalt not kill. I'm sorry I broke that commandment, but I truly believe God has forgiven Jeremy and I.
In court, the Moodys were all smiles and apologies, asserting their faith in God, asking the judge to be able to see their kids, and even pleading guilty. It got to them kissing in court right in front of everyone. It was probably their last kiss, though, as they both received consecutive life sentences. Talk about a bad breakup.